My Republican colleagues will tell you that they are just going after waste, fraud, and abuse. I think this is a big, ugly bill.
I challenge them, explain why taxpayer dollars should be funding queer feminist discourse in Albanian society.
Ilhan Omar thought she had the perfect attack line. The usual sob story about Republicans taking food from hungry children and health care from the sick. The tired class warfare playbook that's worked for decades. But then something happened that left her speechless, exposed, and humiliated on the House floor. Brandon Gill dropped a truth bomb so devastating that it laid bare the entire Democrat strategy of emotional manipulation and misdirection. With just one simple question, he destroyed not just Omar's argument, but the entire foundation of progressive spending policy. Explain why taxpayer dollars should be funding queer feminist discourse in Albanian society or drag shows in Ecuador. She couldn't. No Democrat could, and in that moment of stunned silence, millions of Americans finally saw what their tax dollars are really funding. You're about to witness the exact moment when decades of wasteful government spending was exposed for all to see. When the emotional blackmail of hungry children and preventable deaths crashed headfirst into the cold, hard reality of where your money is actually going. And the look on Omar's face said it all. Before we dive into the explosive exchange that has Democrats running for cover, you need to understand what was really at stake in this hearing. This wasn't just another partisan squabble over budget numbers. This was about the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, a revolutionary program that has already saved American taxpayers over $200 billion. Think about that number for a second. $200 billion. That's not pocket change. That's money that was being wasted, siphoned off, or spent on programs so ridiculous that no politician would dare defend them publicly. Money that could have fixed our roads, strengthened our military, or simply been left in your pocket where it belongs. But instead of celebrating these massive savings, Democrats like Ilhan Omar have been on the attack. Why? Because DOGE threatens something they value far more than efficient government, their ability to buy votes with your money. Omar's attack started with the usual emotional appeals. Devastating cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. Millions of Americans kicked off health care. More hungry children. More preventable deaths. It's the same script Democrats have been reading from for 50 years. Paint Republicans as heartless monsters who want to see people suffer. Claim any attempt to cut spending means literal death for the vulnerable. But here's what makes this attack so dishonest. She never once addressed what DOGE actually cut. Not a single word about the specific programs that lost funding. Not one example of the supposed devastation. Just vague warnings about hungry children and preventable deaths. Why? Because she knows that if Americans saw what was actually being cut, they'd be outraged, not at Republicans, but at Democrats for wasting their money for decades. Brandon Gill wasn't going to let her get away with it, and his response was nothing short of devastating. I found that so many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have not been upset about the waste, fraud, and abuse that this process has uncovered, Jill began. Rather, they've been angry that the fraud has been exposed at all. This is the dirty secret of Washington politics. The outrage isn't about cuts to essential services. It's about the exposure of decades of wasteful spending that has enriched special interests, funded radical ideological projects, and created a permanent bureaucratic class insulated from accountability. Gill went on to lay out exactly what DOGE found. Hundreds of millions of dollars funding left-wing media outlets like NPR and PBS. Welfare payments to illegal aliens. Funding for international organizations, censoring American citizens, and programs promoting ideologies that tens of millions of Americans find utterly repulsive. This isn't about feeding hungry children. This is about funding a radical agenda that could never survive in the marketplace of ideas. An agenda that requires government force and taxpayer dollars to sustain itself. And then came the knockout blow. The question that left Omar and every Democrat in that room speechless. I challenge them to be straightforward with the American people and explain why taxpayer dollars should be funding queer feminist discourse in Albanian society or drag shows in Ecuador. This is what they don't want you to see. This is what they're really defending when they talk about cruel budget cuts. Not food stamps for struggling families or health care for the elderly, but ideological projects in foreign countries that have nothing to do with America's national interests or the well-being of American citizens. The most telling part? No Democrat took up his challenge. No one stood up to defend these programs. No one could look the American people in the eye and say, yes, funding drag shows in Ecuador is more important than letting you keep your own money. Instead, they did what they always do when exposed. Changed the subject. They attacked Elon Musk as a shadow president. They organized protests against Tesla. They did everything except address the actual issue at hand. The indefensible waste of taxpayer dollars on projects that benefit no American except the bureaucrats who administer them. But the story gets even more outrageous. As Elon Musk revealed on Joe Rogan's podcast, the waste and fraud uncovered by DOGE is far worse than anyone imagined. It's not just questionable spending on foreign ideological projects. It's outright fraud on a massive scale. The Social Security Administration's database contains people with impossible birthdays, either older than the oldest living American or born in the future. Dead people receiving benefits. Fake identities collecting checks. And when Republicans tried to clean up these obvious cases of fraud, Democrats fought tooth and nail to stop them. Why? Because, as Musk explained, that's the nature of the scam. It's a bank shot. Once someone is registered in the Social Security database, even with an obviously fraudulent birth date, they become eligible for payments from every government program. Remove them from one database and the entire fraud scheme collapses. This isn't speculation. This isn't partisan spin. This is documented by the Social Security Administration's own Inspector General, who found that about $31 million in benefits were paid to deceased individuals in just 1 year. And here's where Omar's emotional blackmail becomes truly insidious. She claims Republicans want to take food from hungry children, but what's really happening is that Republicans want to stop payments to dead people, non-existent people, and fraudsters who are stealing from programs meant for the truly needy. Every dollar lost to fraud is a dollar that can't help a family in genuine need. Every million wasted on queer feminist discourse in Albanian society is a million that could have provided health care to American children. Every billion squandered on bureaucratic inefficiency is a billion that could have strengthened our military, rebuilt our infrastructure, or simply been returned to the taxpayers who earned it. The choice isn't between helping the vulnerable and abandoning them. It's between efficient, accountable government that directs resources where they're truly needed and a bloated, corrupt system that enriches the connected while failing those it claims to serve. This exchange between Omar and Gil isn't just another partisan squabble. It's a perfect illustration of the fundamental dishonesty at the heart of progressive politics, the emotional blackmail, the misdirection, the refusal to engage with the actual substance of criticisms, the knee-jerk demonization of anyone who questions wasteful spending as wanting to harm the vulnerable. It's a strategy designed to shut down debate before it begins, to make it impossible to discuss the actual merits of government programs, to protect a system that has failed the very people it claims to help while enriching those who administer it. And it's a strategy that relies on your ignorance, on you not knowing where your tax dollars actually go, on you accepting at face value the claim that any budget cut means hungry children and preventable deaths rather than an end to drag shows in Ecuador or queer feminist discourse in Albania. The irony, as Gil pointed out, is that the Democrats' supposed concern for the vulnerable didn't prevent them from causing the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, putting tens of millions at risk of missing the very SNAP payments Omar claims to be protecting. Their concern for the poor doesn't extend to supporting tax cuts that Oxford analysis showed would boost consumer spending and put more money in people's pockets. And their attacks on the evil rich ring hollow when their own leaders, like Bernie Sanders, have talked their way right into the millionaire bracket they claim to despise. This isn't about compassion versus cruelty. It's about honesty versus deception, about a government that works for the people versus one that works for itself, about programs that achieve their stated goals versus those that exist primarily to sustain the bureaucracy that administers them. The most revealing aspect of this entire exchange is what didn't happen. No Democrat stood up to defend the specific programs Gil mentioned. No one made the case for why American taxpayers should fund queer feminist discourse in Albania or drag shows in Ecuador. No one explained how these expenditures serve America's national interests or help vulnerable Americans. Instead, they attacked the messenger. They demonized Elon Musk. They organized protests and vandalized cars. They did everything except address the actual substance of the criticism. This is a pattern we see time and again. When progressive policies fail, when wasteful spending is exposed, when fraud is uncovered, the response is never to engage with the criticism on its merits. It's to attack the critics, change the subject, or simply shout louder about the supposed cruelty of those who dare to question the status quo. What's particularly galling is that government efficiency shouldn't be a partisan issue. As Gil noted, both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama launched initiatives to cut waste and improve government performance. Joe Biden himself oversaw an efficiency push during the Obama years. This used to be something both parties could agree on. Taxpayer dollars should be spent wisely and achieve their intended purpose. But somewhere along the way, the Democratic Party abandoned this common-sense position. They became defenders of waste, champions of inefficiency, protectors of fraud. Not because they believe these things are good, but because they've become captive to a bureaucratic system that benefits from the status quo. The result is the absurd spectacle we witnessed in that hearing. A sitting congresswoman essentially arguing that cutting funding for queer feminist discourse in Albania means hungry children in America. A nonsensical position that can only be maintained through emotional manipulation and a steadfast refusal to engage with the actual substance of the debate. The exchange between Ilhan Omar and Brandon Gil reveals something profound about our politics. On one side, a demand for accountability, efficiency, and respect for taxpayer dollars. On the other, emotional blackmail, misdirection, and a refusal to defend the indefensible. One represents what government should be. A careful steward of the people's money, directing resources where they're truly needed, eliminating waste and fraud, and always remembering that every dollar spent was first earned by a hardworking American. The other represents what government has become. A self-sustaining machine that exists primarily to perpetuate itself, that funds projects no taxpayer would voluntarily support, that tolerates fraud because addressing it would threaten the bureaucratic status quo. The question for us is simple. Which vision of government do we want? One that works for us, or one that we work for? One that respects our money, or one that treats it as an endless resource to be squandered on ideological pet projects? One that focuses on actual results, or one that hides behind emotional appeals while failing those it claims to help? If this breakdown of Ilhan Omar's humiliation opened your eyes to the reality of government waste, hit that subscribe button right now. We're going to keep bringing you the stories others won't touch, the clips others won't show, and the truth others try to hide. The next time you hear a politician claim that budget cuts will harm the vulnerable, ask them the same question Brandon Gill asked. Explain why taxpayer dollars should be funding queer feminist discourse in Albanian society or drag shows in Ecuador. Watch them squirm. Watch them change the subject. Watch them attack you personally rather than answer the question. Because they know the truth is indefensible. They know Americans would be outraged if they saw where their money is actually going. They know their emotional blackmail only works as long as you don't look too closely at the specifics. Doge has already saved American taxpayers $200 billion. That's $200 billion that was being wasted, siphoned off, or spent on programs so ridiculous that no politician will defend them publicly. Imagine what could be done with that money if it were directed to genuine needs or simply left in the pockets of those who earned it. That's the vision Brandon Gill and Republicans are fighting for. That's the system Ilhan Omar and Democrats are defending against. And that's the choice facing every American who pays taxes and cares about where their money goes. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep thinking. Because in a world of emotional manipulation and misdirection, critical thinking is your best defense against those who would use your compassion against you.